A boy raised in Harlem's shadows learned one truth early: the quietest men hold the deadliest power. While others bragged, he listened. While others chased fame, he mastered invisibility. But everything changed the night he walked into a smoke-filled back room and spilled a drop of blood that would bind him to an empire built on silence. From that moment, every whisper, every deal, every vanished enemy pointed to him, the ghost everyone feared and the FBI could never catch. But there was one mistake he didn't see coming, one quiet betrayal that turned the entire underworld toward him. And what happened next still haunts New York's darkest streets. East Harlem in the late 1950s was a world wrapped in smoke and secrets. A place where children learned to run before they learned to trust, where men spoke softly because loud voices drew bullets, and where every stoop had eyes. The neighborhood smelled of fresh bread from Italian bakeries at dawn, and of hot asphalt and exhaust by night. Women leaned over fire escapes, shaking out sheets that fluttered like white flags, though everyone knew there were no white flags in this part of New York. Peace was earned, never given. On January 8, 1957, in a cramped East Harlem apartment above a corner store that sold cigarettes and dreams on credit, Liborio Salvatore Bellomo entered the world. The baby cried, but not for long. Maybe the walls taught him early what the streets would demand later: silence. His father, Salvatore Bellomo, wasn't just any neighborhood man. He was a soldier in the Genovese crime family, one of the 5 families that controlled New York from the shadows like unseen kings. While other fathers left home with lunch pails, Salvatore left with a pressed suit, polished shoes, and an unspoken understanding: he might not return. Barney, as he would soon be called, wasn't raised on fairy tales. His bedtime stories were whispered arguments behind closed doors. His lullabies were the murmurs of men playing cards in back rooms, espresso cups clinking like tiny gavel strikes. And outside, gunshots were less a shock and more a punctuation mark in the rhythm of life. In this world, the mafia wasn't legend, it was oxygen. You breathed it in, whether you wanted to or not. During the daytime, the neighborhood could look almost innocent. Kids kicked stickballs in the street. Vendors sold fruit from wooden carts. Priests walked their parishes like weary guardians over restless souls. But under the surface, everything was claimed: every sidewalk, every business, every conversation. La Cosa Nostra watched everything. You couldn't see them, but you could feel them. Like saints in old Catholic paintings, stern, watching, unforgiving. Barney grew up knowing exactly who held power. It was the man who never had to shout. The one people stepped aside for without being asked. The one whose smile could mean friendship or your last warning. Boys his age collected baseball cards. Barney collected lessons. Lessons about loyalty, about who you could trust, about how a single word spoken to the wrong ear could end a bloodline. There were rules in East Harlem. Everyone knew them. No stealing from the neighborhood. No disrespect. No talking to cops. And above everything, no betrayal. He learned early that silence wasn't just a rule. It was survival. By age 7, Barney was running errands, small ones at first, delivering envelopes from the back of the bakery to the old men in the social club 2 blocks away. Mama thought he was helping buy bread. Papa knew better. He was being tested. If the boy could carry money through the streets and return without a word about where it went or who it came from, he was already useful. In this world, usefulness could carry you further than talent. Sometimes he would walk past the club late at night, when the windows glowed dim and smoke curled from the doorway like the breath of a dragon. Men with hard faces stood outside, watching the street with the calm patience of predators. If Barney was with his father, they nodded. If he was alone, they stared, not unkindly, but measuring him. Is this boy loyal? Is he weak? Will he be one of us someday? He felt it even as a child: expectation. A weight on his shoulders he never asked for but could never put down. And then there was the strange twist of fate: another boy in the neighborhood with almost the exact same name. Liborio Thomas Bellomo, a double cousin through tangled Sicilian marriages that blurred family lines until everyone was related by blood or by oath. In any other neighborhood, it would have been confusing. Here, it became legendary. Years later, when the FBI searched for Liborio Bellomo, they sometimes got the wrong one. Two names, one destiny, and the shadows smirked at the confusion. But in childhood, it was just another reminder. Barney existed in a world where identity was fluid, where truth and lies lived side by side, and where even your name could be a weapon if used correctly. While America in the 1960s worshipped rock music, bright colors, and freedom, East Harlem lived to a different beat. The shuffle of cards on a felt table, the clink of whiskey glasses, the rustle of bills counted in dim rooms. Outsiders talked about the American dream. In Harlem, the dream was simpler. Power without exposure. Money without fame. Respect without needing to speak. On Sundays, the family went to church. Mothers prayed loudly with rosaries, but the men prayed in silence, for deals to go smoothly, for police to stay blind, for bullets to find someone else. Barney watched them all. He saw the duality, devotion to God on Sunday, devotion to the life every other day. He understood, even before he could name it, that this world was built on contradictions. Warm smiles, cold decisions, family dinners, silent disappearances, faith in the saints, trust only in your crew. Barney wasn't loud or reckless.
He observed.
He listened. He learned the power of quiet. Some kids crave attention. Barney learned early that the most dangerous man is the one you don't notice until it's too late. By the time he was a teenager, he could read the street like scripture. He knew which store paid tribute, which corner belonged to which crew, which men were soldiers, and which were bosses pretending to be nobodies. He also knew something deeper. He belonged to this world. Not by choice, but by blood. The son of a mob soldier, raised among shadows, molded by silence. Destiny wasn't an idea. It was a road already paved before he could walk. No one told Barney he would one day control Harlem. They didn't have to. He felt it in the way men greeted his father, in the way doors opened when he approached, in the way danger seemed to circle him like a dog that recognized its master. Barney was born into a world where power was inherited like a curse, where every handshake carried risk, where a promise was sacred, and breaking it meant death. A world where children grew into soldiers, soldiers into captains, and captains into ghosts that ruled cities from behind closed doors. All the while, Harlem watched him grow, the quiet boy with sharp eyes, walking streets lined with secrets. The neighborhood shaped him like iron in a fire. Pressure made him stronger. Silence made him invisible. One day, he wouldn't just live in the shadows. He would rule them. But for now, he was only the boy born under omertà, a child shaped for power, raised by danger, protected by silence. A future dawn learning life, one whispered lesson at a time. Welcome my beautiful family and friends to my YouTube channel. Please click on subscribe, like, comment, and share this video. Thank you specially for sticking around to this very moment. Now back to the story. Most mobsters are forged in the streets. Barney Bellomo was forged in two worlds. In the daylight, he looked like any ambitious young man with a future paved in opportunity. He carried textbooks instead of envelopes, attended lectures instead of sit-downs, and handed in assignments while rival kids handed in tribute to capos. Teachers praised him for being sharp, focused, promising. They said he could have been anything: an accountant, a businessman, a professor. He smiled. He nodded. He played the role. But every night, the streets called him home. Barney enrolled in business school first. Numbers always made sense to him. Maybe because money was the only language Harlem truly respected. He studied profit margins and accounting formulas, but his real homework came later in the back rooms of social clubs where smoke hung in the air like fog over a graveyard. Professors talked about supply and demand. Old men in the clubhouse talked about tribute and loyalty. One earned you a degree. The other earned you power and survival. After business school came something stranger: mortuary science. While other students learned marketing or engineering, Barney learned embalming and funeral techniques. A bizarre choice to outsiders. But in the mafia world, it was genius. Funeral homes were quiet, cash-heavy, perfect for private meetings. perfect for messages delivered without witnesses. He could prepare a body by day and help create one by night. People wondered why such a bright kid chose corpses and coffins. Some whispered he was morbid. Others thought he simply needed steady work. No one imagined the real reason. Funeral homes were neutral territory, places where enemies shook hands next to grieving widows, where secrets were buried as deep as the dead. Then came Paris, a world far away from Harlem's brick walls and neon signs. He stepped into a land of wine, fashion, and philosophy. A place where he could have reinvented himself, escaped destiny, vanished into ordinary life. But destiny isn't escaped. It waits. It stalks. And Barney didn't leave the life behind. He studied it from a distance. Saw how European crime circles moved like chess pieces. Observed how wealth and power were traded with glances instead of guns. How corruption dressed itself in silk and diplomacy. He learned something vital. Violence wins wars. Education builds kingdoms. School taught him how the world worked, but the mafia taught him how to survive in it. Every night after classes, Barney returned to Harlem. Past the street vendors, past the kids smoking on stoops, past the women calling their sons in for dinner. He would push open the heavy door of the social club, and inside, a different universe. Dim lights. Velvet chairs worn by decades of deals. Espresso machines hissing like snakes. Men leaning close, speaking low, always watching. He never barged in. He entered quietly, respectfully. In a room full of wolves, the loudest man died first. The old-timers taught him their language. Not English, not Sicilian, but the unspoken language of power. A raised eyebrow signaled approval. A tapped finger on the table meant caution. A hand on the shoulder meant you now owed a favor you couldn't refuse. No classroom could teach what these men taught him. How to judge a man by his handshake. How to spot fear in someone's eyes. How to know when a smile hit a blade. In those rooms, lessons weren't lectures. They were warnings. One night, an older capo named Don Peppino sat Barney down. The room was silent except for ice clinking in whiskey glasses. The air felt heavy, like something sacred was about to be spoken. Peppino leaned in, voice gravelly with decades of cigarettes and secrets. In this life, ragazzo, there are only 4 rules. Break one, and the next wake you attend might be your own. He held up one finger. Earn. A man who doesn't make money is dead weight. The mafia has no room for dead weight. Another finger. Obey. Orders aren't suggestions. Loyalty is measured in actions, not words. A third. Never speak to the law. Cops ask questions. Snitches answer them. And snitches don't get funerals, they disappear. Finally, the 4th. Blood in, no way out. You join through blood. You leave through death. Barney absorbed every word like scripture. These weren't rules. They were chains of honor and steel, binding him to a world he'd never truly chosen, but now belonged to by birth, by environment, by destiny. Barney lived 2 lives, but one was only a shadow of the other. Professors saw discipline. The mob saw potential. His classmates studied for exams. He studied human nature. While others chased careers, he was chasing something darker, higher, more dangerous. Power without spotlight. Respect without noise. The kind of authority you feel, not see. He learned patience. He learned to speak less and listen more. He learned that the most powerful man in the room is often the one who says nothing. After dark, he'd watch business deals unfold like theater. Envelopes sliding across tables, debts negotiated with glances. He learned how to run gambling operations, how loan sharking worked, how unions were controlled like puppets on invisible strings. He learned not just how money flowed, but how fear flowed with it. 1 mistake could get a man beaten. 2 mistakes could get him buried. Barney never made mistakes. He observed. He blended in. He absorbed everything like a sponge, soaking up the underworld. The old men began to notice the quiet kid who didn't flinch when things got tense, who didn't ask stupid questions, who understood the value of silence better than most soldiers twice his age. In a world where loud men died young, Barney's silence became his armor. His ambition was invisible, and that made him dangerous. By the time he was in his early 20s, Barney understood the truth. School might earn him a diploma, but the mafia would one day earn him a throne. But thrones in this world were carved from bones and held up by secrets. One slip, one loose word, one moment of doubt, and everything could collapse. He watched men he knew vanish without funerals. He heard whispers of betrayals ending in midnight walks that no one returned from. Every story was a warning, every corpse a lesson. Power wasn't taken. It was earned slowly, quietly, and kept only by fear and loyalty. Barney was preparing for a future no college could imagine. A future that required more than intelligence. It demanded cunning, control, coldness, and the patience of a predator. His dual life sharpened him. Half scholar, half street prince. A man with one foot in legitimacy, the other in organized crime. By the time the world noticed Barney Bellomo, it would already be too late. He wasn't just being educated. He was being crafted into a weapon. 1977, a humid summer night in East Harlem. The city was alive with noise, honking cars, distant sirens, laughter from corner bars. But inside one small room above a pizzeria on First Avenue, the world felt impossibly quiet. The room smelled of tomato sauce from below, gun oil, and burning candle wax. Outside, teenagers played stickball. Inside, history waited. Liborio, Barney, Bellomo stood in the center of the dim room, surrounded by men who would shape the rest of his life. Capos, soldiers, men whose names were spoken only in whispers. His heartbeat thundered like footsteps in an empty church. He was no longer a boy running envelopes. He was no longer the student living two lives. Tonight, one of those lives would die, and the other would be born. A table sat in the middle of the room. Simple, wooden, ordinary to any passerby. But to men of La Famiglia, it held the weight of centuries. On it lay a saint's picture, yellowed from age. A gun cleaned and cold. A knife, small but sharp enough to change a life. This wasn't ceremony for show. This was contract. Bloodbound. Eternal. One of the older bosses, face like carved stone and voice like gravel dragged across concrete, nodded at Barney. No smile. No warmth. The kind of nod that tells you this is it, your last chance to turn back. Barney didn't move. Didn't flinch. He had spent years preparing for this moment. In silence. In shadows, watching and learning. Now, everything he had been molded into would be tested. A soldier stepped forward with a small needle. No words. No hesitation. He pricked Barney's finger, and a bead of blood swelled like a ruby against his skin. Blood. The price of entry. Blood. The currency of loyalty. Blood. The signature that could never be erased. The boss placed the saint's card in Barney's hand. A patron saint of protection, or doom, depending on how your life turned out. He struck a match and touched it to the edge of the card. The image curled as flames ate it alive, shrinking into ash. Barney felt heat against his palm. The burning saint stung, but he didn't drop it. He couldn't. Not until the oath was spoken. Not until his soul was no longer his own. His voice came quiet, steady, but heavy with meaning. The kind of oath that changed a man's future forever. May I burn like this if I betray the family. The card burned down to black flakes, singeing his skin, smoke rising like a ghost. When Barney opened his hand, only ash remained, and whatever innocence he had left burned with it. The boss looked into his eyes, not to congratulate him, but to measure him, to see if the fire behind the oath was real. In those seconds, everything was silent. No street noise. No kitchen sounds from the pizzeria below. Just breath and fate. Then the boss spoke, voice low and final. You are now uomo di onore, a man of honor. A simple sentence, but it thundered louder than any gunshot. Hands reached out, hands that once tested him, doubted him, watched him. Now they greeted him not as a kid, but as a made man. One by one, they kissed his cheek, shook his hand, embraced him. Where once he was invisible, now he was untouchable. A soldier. a brother, a weapon. Respect followed. Doors opened where they once required knocking. Men twice his age stepped aside when he entered. People whispered his name not like a question, but like a warning. He earned a seat at tables where money flowed like wine, where decisions about life and death were made between sips of espresso, where every laugh was laced with danger. Fear followed too, respect's silent twin. People who once overlooked him now chose their words carefully around him. Even friends spoke softer, not sure yet what kind of man he would become. Word spread quickly through Harlem. Barney Bellomo has been made. And with those whispers came something else, something he knew would come eventually, like night follows day. The FBI. Agents who once brushed past him now took notice. They watched him leaving the club, watched who he met, watched how effortlessly he stepped into rooms reserved for men who'd killed to be there. To the Bureau, a made man wasn't just a criminal, he was a target. A thread that, if pulled, might unravel an empire. But Barney wasn't like the loud, flashy gangsters they loved to catch. He didn't wear gold chains. He didn't drive flashy Cadillacs. He didn't talk unless necessary. He understood from the moment his blood touched that card. A made man survives by being unseen. Where others sought fame, he sought silence. Where others showed power, he hid it. Where others bragged, he planned. At 20 years old, Barney walked out of that room above the pizzeria not just as a man, but as property of La Cosa Nostra. His soul wasn't his anymore. His future wasn't his anymore. His life, from that night on, belonged to the family. It was a life of privilege, but also of chains. A path where betrayal meant death, where loyalty was everything, where blood once spilled could never be unspilled. The night air outside felt different. Sharper. Colder. As if the city itself recognized him now. He looked down the street he grew up on. The bakery where he delivered envelopes, the stoop where he watched old men exchange secrets, the corner where boys played stickball unaware of the world beneath their feet. It was all the same, and yet nothing was. Because now he wasn't just in the life. He was bound to it. He couldn't go back to classrooms and textbooks. He couldn't pretend to be normal anymore. He was a soldier. A brother. A blade in the dark. The boy disappeared in that room. The man walked out. And with every step, the city watched, respectful, fearful, curious. Barney Bellomo wasn't loud, but he didn't need to be. His silence spoke enough. The Mafia had given him entry. Now he had to prove he deserved it. With loyalty, with discipline, with blood if necessary. Respect followed. Fear followed. And in the shadows, notebooks opened, files were stamped, agents whispered his name. The FBI now had eyes on Barney Bellomo. They just didn't know yet. He would become the ghost they could never catch. The initiation changed one thing for certain. Barney Bellomo no longer walked Harlem streets as just another neighborhood kid. He walked with purpose now, with weight, with expectation. Every step felt like it carried a legacy behind it. The old men at the social club looked at him differently, no longer as the quiet boy who fetched envelopes, but as a man among wolves. His first real home in the life became the 116th Street crew, a crew whispered about in bars and kitchens, feared in loan offices, respected in construction yards. They controlled gambling, loan sharking, labor rackets, protection money, everything that flowed like an underground river of cash through Harlem. You didn't cross them. You didn't refuse them. You didn't even speak their name loud. Where gaudy flashed diamonds, Barney wore plain jeans and scuffed sneakers. No loud suits. No flashy cars. He understood something many mobsters never learned. Visibility is vulnerability. Silence is power. While other captains dined in fancy restaurants under chandeliers, Barney held meetings in parking lots, alleys, diners at midnight, places where conversation dissolved into the hum of traffic, where no hidden microphone could survive the cold wind. He'd stand beside a running car, cigarette burning slow between his fingers, exchanging instructions like a man trading secrets with the night. No documents. No recordings. Just eyes, voice, memory. Gone once the moment passed. A handshake meant agreement. A nod meant a life spared or taken. And yet, for all his simplicity, he was deadly when required. He wasn't the kind who sent loud messages with machine guns. No, his messages came quietly. A man who owed money disappeared for a week. Came back walking slower, speaking softer. A bookmaker who skimmed off the top woke up with broken fingers and a new respect for honesty. He wasn't cruel, he was efficient. Violence was a tool, not a thrill. And that made him more dangerous than the men who enjoyed it. The crew noticed. So did the streets. Suddenly, people who'd never looked his way now greeted him with lowered eyes, respect dripping from every syllable.
"Barney," they said.
Not loudly, softly, like a prayer. Or a warning. He was invisible to the outside world, but unmistakable inside it. Money flowed in, gambling dens hidden behind laundromats, loan payments collected weekly with interest that could make men bleed metaphorically or literally, whichever they preferred less. Construction unions bent, sometimes willingly, sometimes with persuasion. Harlem paid tribute, and Barney made sure tribute never stopped moving. The old heads of the crew watched him as if studying an evolving creature, calm, disciplined, patient. No boasting, no recklessness. He listened more than he spoke. He counted cash with the same precision a surgeon uses on an open chest. He knew which men could be trusted, which could be pressured, which would someday need to disappear. Most men earn rank slowly, decades of proving themselves, building relationships, surviving wars. Barney rose like smoke, quietly, steadily, impossible to grasp. Before he was 30, whispers traveled through the underworld like electricity. Bellomo's sharp. Kid's got brains for business. He doesn't make noise. He'll go far if he lives long enough. At just 30 years old, a time when many men are still dreaming about power, Barney became captain, a capo in one of the most feared mafia organizations in America. It wasn't luck. It was design. Years of silence, obedience, calculated moves, all leading to one moment when the bosses nodded his name and the room accepted it. From there, his world expanded. Bigger tables, bigger envelopes, bigger responsibilities. He sat in rooms where futures were decided, union contracts, territory disputes, share percentages. He listened as older men argued over power, like children over candy. Yet he rarely raised his voice. He didn't need to. When Barney spoke, people leaned in. Men twice his age noticed how he absorbed everything, patterns, intentions, weaknesses. Power found him the way a shadow finds dawn. But power comes with a price. The higher one climbs, the colder the air. And below, others wait, not to help you rise, but to see you fall. Not everyone liked the quiet young capo, with influence growing like ivy. Old soldiers who'd spent decades earning small slices of respect now watched this young man step into rooms they'd only dreamed of. Envy is a quiet poison. It doesn't shout. It smiles. It waits. Men would shake his hand in the morning and plan his funeral by nightfall. Some muttered, "Kid's too young. He's moving too fast. He's getting too close to the top." Others wondered how someone so calm could hold so much power. A man who didn't shout? Dangerous. A man who rarely drank? More dangerous. A man who never boasted about violence? The most dangerous of all. In the crew, respect is control, but fear is insurance. And while Barney earned respect through money and discipline, he learned quickly that sometimes, for survival, fear had to walk beside him. A few early challenges came. A soldier delayed payments. A bookmaker tried to skim. A rival whispered about testing Barney's authority. Those men didn't last long. Nothing loud. Nothing messy. Just corrected. A broken jaw here. A stolen business returned. A quiet funeral for someone who ignored a warning. The message spread like wildfire. Bellomo isn't loud. But cross him, and he becomes thunder. Still, he kept his head down. No interviews. No tabloids. No flamboyant nightlife. He didn't chase fame, he chased longevity. He watched high-profile bosses burn like magnesium under federal spotlight. He saw what the law hated most, visibility. And he avoided it like a plague. While others posed for cameras, Barney posed for no one. While others loved attention, he loved shadows. It was his invisibility that made him untouchable and terrifying. Harlem respected him. The family trusted him. Money followed him like a loyal dog. But for every dollar he earned, every territory he secured, every whispered deal that went his way, another pair of eyes watched him. Sometimes from across the table, sometimes from behind him. Jealousy grows where success lives. And Barney understood a truth older than the mafia itself. Every king has a challenger. Every rise invites a blade in the dark.
His ascent was swift.
Too swift for comfort. He didn't show fear, but he felt the heat. Because power in this life isn't inherited peacefully. It's taken. It's defended. And it's paid for, often in blood. As Barney tightened his grip on Harlem's underbelly, he couldn't escape the knowledge. He had climbed high enough to be seen. And now, someone somewhere wanted him to fall. Power in the mafia isn't inherited like a crown. It's sensed, like wolves recognizing a rising alpha. And among those wolves, there was one whose shadow stretched farther than anyone else's. Vincent Gigante. To the public, a lunatic in a bathrobe, shuffling through Greenwich Village muttering to himself. To the FBI, a mystery wrapped in madness. To the Genovese family, the real boss, the invisible hand that moved New York like chess pieces on asphalt. He walked the streets like a ghost no bullet could justify shooting. A man who fooled doctors, judges, police, who turned insanity into armor. While other dons posed for cameras in silk suits, Chin hid in plain sight dressed like a man who'd lost his mind. But behind that facade, sharp as broken glass, colder than a winter river, a strategist with a patience that could suffocate armies. And he noticed Barney. Not because Barney demanded attention, but because he didn't. Where other young capos tried to impress, Barney observed. Where others bragged, Barney listened. Where others moved with ego, Barney moved with caution.
Discipline, caution, profitability.
3 qualities the mafia preached, but few truly mastered. Chin watched this quiet young captain from Harlem and saw something rare, a future that didn't need to roar to be feared. It didn't start with formal meetings. The mafia never worked like that. It began with small nods across a room. A whispered question asked privately. A seat offered closer to the center of power. Guidance given in fragments, never as advice, always as test. Sometimes a soldier would vanish after defying orders. Sometimes a deal would appear in Barney's lap, lucrative and risky, to see how he handled heat. Sometimes Chin would send messages through others, instructions hidden in compliments or warnings disguised as jokes. Barney understood every layer. He handled disputes without blood when blood wasn't necessary. He enforced discipline without chaos. He doubled profits quietly, safely, invisibly. He didn't run towards power. He let power come to him. And Chin admired that. Where Gotti was a star, Barney was a shadow. And shadows outlive stars. Chin never lectured, never preached. He taught by example, by showing that invisibility is the ultimate weapon. One evening, Barney was summoned to a private walk. No entourage, no armed escort, just 2 men moving through dim New York streets like old friends. Chin wore slippers and a housecoat, the costume of madness, yet his eyes, sharp and calculating, gave away the truth. He spoke softly, as though speaking to the wind. Flashy men die first, Barney. The government loves a loud boss. But a quiet one? Hard to indict a ghost. Barney nodded, absorbing every word like scripture. He didn't ask questions, that was the rule. He listened. Another night, in a back room filled with cigar smoke so thick it could strangle a weak man, Chin leaned in. People want to be feared. But real power is being underestimated. When they think you're nothing, that's when you're everything. Those lessons shaped Barney more than bullets ever could. Years passed, indictments fell like dominoes across New York. Bosses were arrested, soldiers flipped, captains vanished. Headlines screamed the demise of the mafia again and again. But each time the storm came, Barney stayed standing.
Why?
Because storms destroy what stands tall. Barney never stood tall. He crouched in shadows, eyes open, ears sharp. Where others demanded a crown, he carried it quietly. Where others wanted fame, he wanted survival. Every time the bosses fell, the organization looked for someone who could keep the ship steady, someone who wouldn't draw light or bullets. And there, standing in the quiet, was Barney. Not waving his hand, not asking for the throne, just present, reliable, profitable, like a man designed for power, without wanting to be seen holding it. Chin began using Barney as a bridge, between crews, between territories, between decisions too delicate to be spoken openly. When orders needed to pass invisibly, they passed through Barney. When money needed to move without fingerprints, it moved through him. When trouble sparked, Barney put it out without flames. He became the unsung architect of stability. And that is how power slips into a man's grasp, not like lightning, but like dusk, slowly swallowing the daylight. There comes a moment in every mobster's life when others stop asking who is he, and start asking how close can we stand without being burned? Barney reached that moment quietly. Soldiers who once saw him as a kid now lowered their heads when he walked in. The capos, twice his age, asked for his opinion. Money flowed through him like blood through arteries. He was no longer just Barney from Harlem. He was a gatekeeper, a strategist, a man who could decide whether someone fed their family or lost their teeth. But what made him terrifying wasn't his rank. It was his silence. He never bragged about violence, never spoke of secrets, never revealed what he knew. He could sit in a room for hours without a sentence and still command it. Men feared him not for what he had done, but for what he might do if crossed. He was becoming something the Mafia rarely created. A boss without a throne. A ruler without a crown. Power without noise. By the late years of Chin's reign, Barney moved through New York like a rumor, felt but never seen. If he was in a meeting, you might not remember his words, only the effect they had. Decisions bent around him like iron around heat. He was a whisper that could shut down businesses, a shadow that could shift millions, a nod that could end wars or start them.
No headlines, no spotlight,
no flashy lifestyle, just cold efficiency. When federal prosecutors pointed at mafia charts, threads connected to Gigante, to captains, to soldiers, but the line to Barney was faint, blurred, unreachable. He was everywhere, and nowhere. And as Chin aged, slowing under the weight of time and indictments, it was clear who the future of Harlem looked toward. Not the loud, not the reckless, not the men chasing glory, but the quiet one. The one who learned patience instead of pride, silence instead of swagger. The one molded slowly, deliberately, by the odd father himself. Barney Bellomo became the kind of mobster other mobsters feared. The man you never hear coming. A shadow trained by a ghost. A strategist carved from discipline. A future ruler hidden behind a soft voice and cold eyes. And soon enough, the underworld would learn what kind of empire a silent man could build. By the early 1990s, the mafia world shook like a city sitting on fault lines.
Bosses were falling.
Rats were talking. Prosecutors were gathering RICO cases like trophies. Federal pressure tightened like a noose around every capo in New York. And in the middle of that chaos, Barney Bellomo rose higher. Vincent Chin Gigante, the mastermind who barked insanity at street corners to confuse the government, was no longer untouchable. Indictments crawled toward him like termites through old wood. The Oddfather's time in the sunlight was dimming, not with noise, but with inevitability. And when the king weakens, the court looks for a successor. They didn't choose the loud one. They didn't choose the flashy one. They chose the ghost. Barney Bellomo, calm, invisible, efficient. He didn't demand power. He simply was power. With Chin occupied with indictments and survival, Barney quietly assumed a role few men ever reach, acting boss of the Genovese family.
No ceremony,
No crown.
no speech.
Just nods in smoky back rooms, sealed with trust and silence. The kind of appointment that isn't written down but everyone feels. From that moment forward, he became something rarer than royalty. A boss without needing to say he was boss. Harlem bent to him first. The streets that raised him now obeyed him. The Bronx followed. Then the waterfront, a place where ships carried cash disguised as freight. And construction? That was a gold mine. Unions were strings. Barney was the puppeteer. Contracts, deals, political favors, all moved through him like electricity through copper. No shouting. No headlines. Just quiet control. The Javits Center, a crown jewel of labor rackets, pumped millions through the Genovese network. A single building became a river. Money washed through it like waves slapping against a hidden dock. Carpenters' unions didn't just cooperate, they bent. No threats necessary. Just pressure. Just presence. Just the awareness that saying no to Bellomo was like saying no to gravity. He was the quiet Don, a man who didn't need an audience to rule. Decisions were made with a glance. A handshake meant a contract more binding than any court document. He didn't yell. He didn't threaten. He didn't brag. Power radiated from him like cold heat. It made some men loyal. It made others terrified. Both served the same purpose. The government hates ghosts. And Barney was disappearing into success too smoothly, too cleanly. Money piled high. The empire expanded. Streets whispered his name like myth. Bellomo runs Harlem now. No, more than Harlem. The Bronx. The docks. He's everywhere and nowhere. That's when the FBI sharpened their focus. Wiretaps bloomed across the boroughs like weeds. Union offices. Meeting spots. Payphones. Even cars. Recorders hid in ceilings, under bar counters, inside lamps. Agents sat in unmarked vans through icy winters, sipping bad coffee, waiting for Barney's voice to slip. One sentence, that's all they needed. One order. One admission. But Barney didn't slip. He didn't talk. He didn't love the sound of his own voice like other mob bosses. He loved silence. They recorded rooms he left moments before. They taped calls he never made. They staked out restaurants he never walked into. Because Barney never left fingerprints. Never left voice prints. Never left trails. He was a leader made of fog. The FBI had photos of him leaving meetings. But no audio. They had surveillance. But no crimes spoken aloud. They had whispers. But no confession, no wiretap gold. He was polite when tailed, even smiled sometimes, but gave nothing. No rants. No threats. No loose talk. Detectives cursed under their breath. He's like a damn ghost with a pulse. Pressure does odd things to men. Some soldiers couldn't hold the weight. Some union officials panicked when subpoenas arrived. Some bookies saw jail time stretch across the horizon like darkness and thought cooperation might buy them daylight. Names were whispered. Charts were drawn. Informants talked and talked and talked. But every time prosecutors thought they had Barney pinned, the evidence slipped like water through fingers. Meetings described, but not recorded. Deals implied, not documented. He was always a few rooms away from the crime. A few words short of guilt. Not clean. Not innocent. Just untouchable. Even when RICO cases stacked like coffins ready for burial, Barney remained eerily calm. No panic. No sudden moves. No reckless attempts to silence witnesses. Violence was a last resort, not a reflex. That made him harder to predict, harder to corner. The FBI had built cases against louder men with ease. Tapes of threats, videos of bribes, confessions caught by microphones hidden in lamps. But Barney? He was a ghost wearing skin. Men feared bosses who screamed. But they feared silent bosses more. Because the quiet man is thinking. Watching. Choosing. Barney could sit at a table during a heated argument and say nothing, and still bend the outcome his way. A raised eyebrow from him changed votes. A simple nod ended discussions. Influence without volume. Authority without theatrics. He controlled an underworld economy without slogans or spotlight. Each week, envelopes fat with tribute found their way to him like birds returning to a roost. The city moved with his invisible hand. A contract approved here. A union slowed down there. A loan paid, or not. A rival suddenly compliant. He never bragged about being boss. Yet everyone behaved like he was. Because power isn't real when screamed. It's real when whispered. And every agent watching him knew the truth. One day, someone would talk. One day, a slip might happen. One day, the ghost might be forced into the light. They waited. He evaded. They pressured. He absorbed. They listened. He stayed silent. He built an empire of concrete, money, labor, ports, all held together with invisible wire and unspoken fear. And as the 1990s progressed, Barney Bellomo stood at a peak few ever reached. A quiet dawn. A shadow ruler. A man whose power was felt more than seen. But shadows stretch long before the sun shifts. And somewhere behind office windows, in federal buildings, agents circled his name on white boards, red string connecting him to a future they hoped would end in handcuffs. The walls were closing slowly, but not enough. Because Barney Bellomo wasn't walking through this world like other mob bosses. He was gliding.
Silent.
Unmarked. Untouched. A ghost wearing skin and ruling a kingdom from behind the veil. Success is a strange thing in the mafia. At first it shields you like a warm coat in winter. Money flows. Doors open. Respect grows. People step aside when you walk in. Whispers stop mid-sentence. For most men, success feels like immortality. But nothing is immortal in this world, not even power. Especially not for those who speak too loudly. While other bosses chase limelight like moths around flame, Barney Bellomo stayed dark. He understood something the flashy dons never did. Visibility is death. Silence is survival. He watched Gotti become a celebrity, and then a prisoner. Watched powerful capos get caught by wiretaps they never saw. Watched entire empires crumble under the weight of RICO indictments, headlines, betrayal. Each downfall was a lesson. Each arrest a warning. Each funeral a reminder. In a world built on secrets, noise is the enemy. Barney never wore diamond rings. Never parked a Cadillac outside nightclubs. Never appeared in tabloids standing next to singers, movie stars, or politicians. He wore simple clothes, ate at ordinary diners, walked streets like any man. Except he wasn't any man. Behind him moved an empire like shadow and smoke. Harlem, the Bronx, the docks, the unions. All of it listening for his voice. But he rarely spoke. He didn't need to. Power isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet that scares people most. When Barney entered a room, he didn't have to announce himself. Silence followed him like a bodyguard. Men lowered their voices, straightened their posture, checked their words. Not because of what he'd said, but because of what he might say. He ruled not through fear of what he had done, but fear of what he could do. That's a different kind of power, deeper, colder, more permanent. As years passed, New York became a graveyard of fallen bosses. Some murdered. Some flipped. Some rotted in cells, remembering when they were gods. FBI raids thundered through neighborhoods like storms. Grand juries convened. Informants whispered. Case files stacked like gravestones. But through the chaos, Barney stayed standing. Not untouched, just unbroken. Not invisible, just unreadable. Where others panicked and lashed out, he stayed patient. Where others bragged, he kept quiet. Where others trusted the wrong friend, Barney trusted no one completely. He understood the oldest truth of the mafia. Betrayal doesn't come from enemies. It comes from friends.
So he spoke rarely.
Shared little. Revealed nothing. He lived like a man who expected knives in backs, bullets in shadows, and therefore never turned his back, never walked into light. It wasn't luck that kept him alive. It was control.
Discipline.
Restraint. A gun can kill one man. A whisper can kill many. But silence? Silence confuses the enemy. Agents spent years trying to record his voice. Nothing. Informants described his influence, but never caught his orders directly. Prosecutors built cases, but lacked the final thread. He was a name without a voice, a power without a face, a dawn without ever needing to roar. He became a living contradiction, famous for being unseen, powerful for being quiet. feared for never raising his tone. Other mobsters left trails. Barney left absence. Absence of conversation. Absence of recordings. Absence of ego. A ghost running an empire of men. He survived where louder men fell, not because he was lucky, but because he understood the price of power. In the underworld, the loud burn first. The flashy get caught. The reckless get betrayed. But Barney? He passed through history like mist, never fully grasped, never fully removed. His life became a blueprint whispered in back rooms. If you want to last, be like Bellomo. Speak little. Move less. Think more. His legacy wasn't built on headlines, but on absence from them. He carved a throne from shadows, built loyalty from fear, and ruled a city without raising his voice. He never spoke. He never flashed. He moved quietly, like a rumor that controlled everything. And therein lies his truth. In a world of betrayal, the silent man is king. In the Mafia, everyone pays a price. Some in blood, some in prison, some in silence. Barney Bellomo chose silence. But silence has a sound. You just have to know how to listen. Watch the next Mafia story that makes this one look tame. You won't believe how power changes a man when bullets become currency. Comment below. Do you think silence made Bellomo powerful or dangerous? If you enjoy true crime stories told like a movie, subscribe to Crime Syndicate Tales, where power always has a price. Subscribe for the next Mafia tale. Like and comment more Mafia stories to unlock the next chapter.